In a modest auto repair shop on the outskirts of town, miracles still happen. Tom Mitchell's weathered hands had fixed countless engines over his 30 years as a mechanic, but nothing prepared him for the moment a blind girl appeared outside. His garage, her wheelchair barely holding together. While others might have seen just another repair job, Tom saw something different, a chance to make a difference. Working through countless nights, he poured his heart into crafting a custom wheelchair that would change her life forever. Little did he know that this act of kindness would catch the attention of Sarah Bennett, one of the most powerful CEOs in the medical industry and the girl's mother. What began as a simple gesture of compassion would blossom into something neither of them expected. But could a man who'd spent his life fixing broken machines help mend two hearts that needed healing most? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun crept through the dusty windows of Mitchell's auto repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Tom Mitchell had already been at work for 2 hours, his calloused hands moving with practiced precision over the engine of Mrs. Henderson's '85 Buick. The old car had seen better days, but Tom knew every squeak and rattle of its aging frame like the voice of an old friend. At 62, Tom's hair had long since turned silver, and laugh lines marked the corners of his eyes, though he hadn't done much laughing since Marie passed 5 years ago. The faded family photo on his workbench caught the morning light, Marie's smile frozen in time beside a younger version of himself. Some days, he could almost hear her teasing him about working too hard. "You've got motor oil in your veins, Thomas Mitchell," she used to say, bringing him lunch during long work days. Now the garage echoed with the solitary sounds of tools against metal and the occasional whir of the overhead fan. The community knew Tom as the mechanic who could fix anything. More importantly, he was the one who'd tell you honestly when something wasn't worth fixing. His reputation had been built on 3 decades of straight talk and fair prices, even when bigger shops moved into town, promising faster service. "These aren't just machines," he often told his younger apprentice Jake. "They're people's livelihoods, their freedom to move, to work, to live. You treat every job like it matters, because to someone it does." The morning's work was interrupted by the familiar rumble of Bill Thompson's pickup truck. Bill had been bringing his vehicles to Tom since before his son was born, and now that son had children of his own. "Morning, Tom," Bill called out, his boots scuffing against the floor. "That power steering's acting up again." Tom wiped his hands on the red shop rag that perpetually hung from his back pocket. "Already? Didn't we just fix that last spring?" "Sure did. But you know how it is with these old trucks. They're like us, starting to show their age." Tom nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd watched the town's vehicles age alongside their owners, each repair a chapter in the ongoing story of their lives. The garage walls held memories of first cars, wedding getaways, and vehicles that had carried children home from hospitals. As he began examining Bill's truck, his mind wandered to the projects waiting in the back of the shop. A young mother's minivan that needed new brakes she couldn't afford. He'd work out a payment plan, as usual. Old Mr. Peterson's riding mower that had seen its last season. He'd have to break that news gently. The radio played softly in the background, classic country songs mixing with the metallic symphony of his work. Tom moved through his day with the steady rhythm of a man who had found his purpose in life, even if sometimes the silence between tasks grew a little too heavy, the empty spaces a little too wide. Just before lunch, Jake arrived for his afternoon shift, bringing with him the energy of youth and a fresh cup of coffee for Tom. "Thought you might need this, boss. You've been here since dawn again, haven't you?" Tom accepted the coffee with a grateful nod. Sleep's overrated when there's work to be done, but they both knew it wasn't just about the work. The garage was his anchor, his way of staying connected to a world that sometimes felt like it was moving too fast, changing too much. As the afternoon sun began to slant through the western windows, Tom took a moment to straighten Marie's photo on his workbench. Her eyes seemed to twinkle with that same knowing look she'd always had, as if she could see right through his carefully maintained routine to the loneliness he kept buried beneath layers of work and responsibility. "Just another day at the office, sweetheart," he murmured to the photo, allowing himself a small smile. He didn't know it yet, but tomorrow would bring a visitor who would change everything. A reminder that sometimes the most important repairs have nothing to do with engines at all. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows when Tom heard it. A metallic screech followed by a soft whimper. He stepped out of the garage, wiping grease from his hands, and there she sat in the failing light. A young girl, maybe 12 or 13, in a wheelchair that protested with every slight movement. Her unseeing eyes were fixed straight ahead, but her hands gripped the wheelchair's armrests with determination. A white cane rested across her lap, and despite the wheelchair's obvious disrepair, she sat with remarkable poise. "Can I help you, miss?" Tom kept his voice gentle, noting how she tilted her head toward the sound. "My chair," she said, managing a smile despite her obvious discomfort. "It's been making these awful noises. Mom usually takes care of things like this, but she's been so busy with work lately." She paused, running her fingers along the chair's worn armrest. "I'm Emily, by the way." Tom crouched down to examine the wheelchair, his experienced eyes quickly cataloging its issues. The frame was bent in several places, the wheels misaligned, and the bearings were shot. "I'm Tom Mitchell. Mind if I take a closer look?" Emily nodded, and Tom began a careful inspection. Each problem he discovered made his frown deepen. This wasn't just wear and tear. This was a wheelchair that had been patched up too many times, each repair a temporary solution to a growing problem. "How long have you had this chair, Emily?" 3 years, she answered, her fingers continuing their thoughtful exploration of the armrest. "It was fine at first, but lately," she shrugged, a gesture too mature for her years. "Things break, I guess." The resignation in her voice stirred something in Tom's heart. He'd heard that tone before, in customers who'd been told something couldn't be fixed, in people who'd learned to expect less than they deserved. "Things do break," he agreed, straightening up, "but that doesn't mean they can't be fixed proper." He paused, watching as she traced the chair's frame with knowing fingers. "Would you like to come inside? It's getting chilly out here." Once inside, Emily's face lit up at the familiar sounds and smells of the workshop. "It smells like my grandfather's shed," she said, smiling. "He used to let me help him fix things, said I had the best ears for diagnosing engine problems." Tom watched as she cocked her head, listening to the gentle purr of Mrs. Henderson's Buick still up on the lift. "That engine's running smooth now," she observed, "but there's a tiny click in the valve train." Tom's eyebrows rose. She was right. There was a slight tick he'd been meaning to check. "You've got quite an ear there, young lady." As Emily described her grandfather's lessons in automotive repair, Tom continued examining her wheelchair. The more he looked, the more his concern grew. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. One good bump could send her sprawling. "Emily," he said finally, "this chair needs more than just a quick fix. Would you be okay waiting here while I make a few calls? We need to figure out the best way to handle this." She nodded, then added with a hint of worry, "I don't know if Mum can afford much right now. She works so hard, but with all the medical bills." Tom's mind was already racing with possibilities, remembering the specialized tools in his back room, the lightweight metals he'd been saving for a special project. "Let's not worry about that just yet," he said, his decision already made. "First, let me see what I can do." As he reached for the phone, he caught sight of Marie's photo. Her smile seemed particularly bright today, as if she approved of what he was about to do. Some repairs, she'd always said, were about more than just fixing what was broken. They were about restoring hope. Long after Emily had been safely driven home by Jake, Tom sat at his workbench, the desk lamp casting a warm glow over scattered sketches and measurement notes. The old, leather-bound notebook Marie had given him on their 20th anniversary lay open, its pages filling with designs he hadn't known were waiting inside him. His eyes drifted to the small frame tucked behind his toolbox, the one he rarely looked at, but could never bring himself to put away. Sarah Beth, their daughter, forever frozen at 6 years old, beaming from her hospital bed. They'd lost her to leukemia 3 decades ago, but some wounds never fully heal. They just become part of who you are. "What do you think, baby girl?" he whispered to the photograph. "Think your old dad still remembers how to build something special?" The late-night silence of the garage was broken by the sound of the side door opening. It was Eddie from the metal fabrication shop down the street, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing a concerned expression. "I figured you'd still be here," Eddie said, setting the coffee beside Tom's sketches. "Jake called, said you had something brewing that couldn't wait till morning." Tom pushed the drawings across the workbench. "Take a look at these. That wheelchair. Today, Eddie, it wasn't just worn out. It was all wrong for her. Mass-produced, one size fits none. She deserves better." Eddie studied the sketches, his weathered face thoughtful. "Custom frame? Adjustable components? This is going to take some doing, Tom. And specialized materials don't come cheap." "I've got savings," Tom said, though they both knew those savings were meant for his retirement. "And that titanium alloy we've been holding on to from the Johnson project, the stuff you were saving for that vintage Indian motorcycle restoration," Eddie interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Tom nodded, his decision already set in stone. Some things matter more than old motorcycles. Eddie pulled up a stool, recognition dawning in his eyes as he looked at the careful measurements and innovative design elements in Tom's sketches. "This isn't just about fixing a wheelchair, is it?" Tom's hands traced the outline of a specially designed wheel bearing. "You remember Sarah Beth's last summer? How she wanted to go to the park, but that standard hospital wheelchair couldn't handle the grass or the small bumps." Eddie's face softened. He'd been there through it all, the diagnosis, the treatments, the final days. "I remember you staying up nights trying to modify that chair." "I ran out of time then," Tom said quietly. "Couldn't figure out the right solutions fast enough. But now," he tapped the drawings, "now I know exactly what needs to be done. And I've got the skills to do it." The two men sat in companionable silence, decades of friendship making words unnecessary. Finally, Eddie stood up, decision made. "I'll open the shop early tomorrow. We'll need to modify some tools for the precision work on those bearings." "Eddie, you don't have to—" "Yeah, I do," Eddie cut him off. "Besides, my granddaughter's about Emily's age. Makes you think." As Eddie headed for the door, he paused. "You know, Marie would be proud of this. Sarah Beth, too." After Eddie left, Tom returned to his sketches, adding details with renewed purpose. The design was taking shape, a lightweight frame that would grow with Emily, wheels engineered for maximum efficiency with minimum effort, custom-fitted supports that would make long days more comfortable. From the back room, he could hear the familiar tick of the old wall clock Marie had insisted on hanging there years ago. Its steady rhythm had accompanied countless repairs, both simple and complex, but this project was different. This wasn't just about fixing something broken, it was about creating something that should have existed all along. He thought about Emily's careful description of her grandfather's workshop, the way her fingers had moved so confidently over surfaces, reading their stories through touch. She deserved a wheelchair that would tell her a story of care, of craftsmanship, of someone taking the time to get things right. As midnight approached, Tom finally stood, his back protesting the long hours at the workbench, but his mind was clear, his purpose set. Tomorrow he'd begin turning these drawings into reality. And somewhere, in whatever heaven existed, he hoped, Sarah Beth was smiling at the thought of her father finally building the chair he'd always wished he could have made for her. The next 2 weeks saw Mitchell's auto repair transform, after hours, into something between a medical device laboratory and an artist's workshop. Tom's drafting table, usually reserved for sketching out engine modifications, now held detailed Technical drawings covered in precise measurements and specialized calculations. Night after night, the garage lights burned long past closing time. The familiar sounds of wrenches and socket sets were joined by the high-pitched whine of precision tools shaping lightweight metals. Tom worked with the focus of a man possessed, stopping only when his eyes grew too tired to guarantee accuracy. "You're really onto something here, Tom," Jake said one evening, holding up a custom-fabricated wheel hub. The young apprentice had been staying late voluntarily, eager to learn from what he called the project of a lifetime. "It's all in the bearings," Tom explained, demonstrating the nearly frictionless rotation. "Traditional wheelchair bearings are good, but they're designed for cost-effectiveness over comfort. Every little bit of resistance adds up over a day of use." The local community had caught wind of the project, and support arrived in unexpected ways. Mrs. Chen from the fabric shop brought high-grade upholstery materials, insisting they would be perfect for custom cushioning. Professor Williams from the Community College Engineering Department stopped by to offer advice on stress calculations for the frame design. Even Bill Thompson contributed, arriving one morning with a box of specialized titanium bolts. "Found these in my machine shop inventory," he said casually, though Tom suspected he'd specially ordered them, thought they might come in handy. The work consumed Tom's evenings, but it was during the quiet hours past midnight that the true innovations emerged. He found himself thinking of Emily's description of her grandfather's workshop, how she experienced the world through sound and touch. Each component needed to not just function perfectly, but feel right under her exploring fingers. One particularly late night, Eddie found Tom testing different textures for the hand rims. "It's 3 in the morning, he observed, setting down a thermos of coffee. "These rims need to provide just the right grip," Tom explained, running his thumb along a specially treated surface. "Too smooth and her hands might slip, too rough and it'll wear on her palms over time." Eddie examined the prototype, nodding appreciatively. "You're thinking about things most people wouldn't even consider." "That's because most people don't really listen," Tom replied, making another minor adjustment. "Emily told me how she knows when her current chair needs attention, by the changes in sound it makes, by the way certain parts feel under her fingers. She reads her wheelchair like a story. I want this one to tell her the right story." The project had taken over not just Tom's nights, but his days as well. Regular customers found themselves fascinated by glimpses of the work in progress. Old Mr. Peterson, who'd initially come in grumbling about his mower, spent an hour discussing the innovative brake system Tom had designed. "Never seen anything quite like it," Jake commented one evening, watching Tom fine-tune the chair's folding mechanism. "The way everything works together, it's like it was made for just one person." Tom finished, smiling slightly. "That's exactly the point. Every person's needs are unique. Emily's chair should be as unique as she is." The calendar pages turned, marked by progress measured in small victories. The perfect balance of the frame, the whisper-quiet operation of the wheels, the intuitive placement of each control. Tom's hands, long accustomed to the brutal honesty of engine work, found new purpose in the precise adjustments this project demanded. Some nights, in the quiet hours when even Eddie had gone home, Tom would sit in his office looking at Sarah Beth's picture. "We're getting it right this time," he'd tell her. "We're making something that's going to change somebody's life." And in those moments, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the evidence of weeks of careful labor, Tom felt closer to both his daughter and his late wife than he had in years. This wasn't just about building a wheelchair anymore. It was about fulfilling a promise he'd made to himself long ago, about using his skills to make the world a little better for someone who needed it. Sarah Bennett's corner office on the 40th floor of Bennett Medical Technologies offered a stunning view of the city skyline, but she barely noticed it anymore. Instead, her attention was fixed on the latest quarterly reports and the stack of urgent emails demanding her response. At 45, she'd become one of the youngest CEOs in the medical device industry, but success had come with its own price tag. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows showed a woman dressed in impeccable business attire, her dark hair styled perfectly, not a detail out of place. The wall behind her desk displayed numerous awards and accolades, testament to her company's innovations in medical technology. Yet none of them meant as much as the single-framed photo on her desk. Emily, age 7, laughing as she fed ducks in the park. "Miss Bennett?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board meeting starts in 5 minutes, and Emily's occupational therapist called. They need to reschedule tomorrow's appointment." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, feeling the familiar weight of competing responsibilities. "Push my evening meetings. I'll take Emily to the park instead." She'd missed too many therapy sessions lately, delegating them to Emily's caregiver while she handled urgent business matters. The board meeting dragged on for 2 hours, filled with discussions about market share and profit margins. Sarah found her thoughts drifting to Emily's wheelchair, the one she'd been meaning to replace for months now. Between the company's merger negotiations and the new product launch, she'd kept putting it off, telling herself the current chair was still functional. "And what about the pediatric mobility division?" one of the board members was asking. "The numbers are still below projections." Sarah straightened in her chair. "We're developing new prototypes, but custom manufacturing costs make it difficult to maintain profitable margins." The words felt hollow, even as she spoke them, remembering Emily's quiet acceptance of her increasingly uncomfortable wheelchair. Later that evening, as her driver navigated through traffic toward home, Sarah scrolled through her phone's photos. Emily's 12th birthday party last month, celebrated a day late because of an unexpected shareholders' meeting. Emily's school concert, which Sarah had only caught the final 10 minutes of, arriving breathless in her business suit. The townhouse was quiet when she arrived home, except for the soft classical music drifting from Emily's room. Her daughter sat by the window, fingers moving across the pages of a Braille book. "Mom." Emily's face lit up at the sound of Sarah's heels on the hardwood floor. "You're home early." Sarah sat on the window seat beside her daughter, taking in the slight grimace as Emily shifted position in her wheelchair. "How about we go feed the ducks, just like we used to?" Emily's smile faltered slightly. "The chair's been making funny noises. Karen said maybe we should wait until it's fixed." The guilt hit Sarah like a physical force. She ran her hand along the wheelchair's frame, feeling the worn spots, the slightly bent areas she'd been too busy to properly address. Here she was, running a company that manufactured medical devices, and she couldn't find the time to properly maintain her own daughter's wheelchair. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have—" "It's okay, Mom," Emily interrupted, reaching out to find Sarah's hand. "I know you're busy doing important things. Besides, I found someone who might be able to help with the chair." Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, wondering when Emily had become so understanding, so adult. The setting sun painted the room in warm colors, highlighting the stack of papers on Emily's desk, her latest science test with an A+ written in bold marker, a testament to her determination to excel despite every obstacle. "You're the important thing," Sarah said softly, making a silent promise to do better, to be more present. Tomorrow, she decided, she would make calls about a new wheelchair. Money wasn't the issue. It never had been. Time, attention, being. There for the small moments. Those were the real currencies she needed to manage better. In the pre-dawn quiet of a Sunday morning, Tom stood back and studied his creation. 3 weeks of late nights, countless adjustments, and more coffee than he cared to remember had led to this moment. The wheelchair before him barely resembled the mass-produced model it was meant to replace. The frame caught the early morning light, its titanium surface finished to a perfect smoothness that invited touch. Every component had been crafted with Emily in mind, from the specialized wheel, hubs that would turn with minimal effort, to the adjustable supports that would grow with her. The cushioning, carefully shaped with Mrs. Chen's materials, provided support exactly where Emily needed it most. "It's beautiful," Eddie said softly from the doorway, breaking the reverent silence, "like something from a museum." Tom ran his hand along one of the armrests, feeling the subtle texture changes he'd incorporated, small, raised patterns that would help Emily orient herself by touch. "More importantly, it works beautifully. We tested every component 3 times over." The chair folded with a whisper-quiet precision that had taken days to perfect. Each moving part had been engineered to provide feedback through sound and sensation, allowing Emily to understand exactly how her chair was performing. Tom had even added a small resonance chamber in the frame that would produce a barely audible tone if anything needed attention. "You're not planning to be there when she finds it, are you?" Eddie asked, though he already knew the answer. Tom shook his head, carefully wrapping the chair in soft, protective covers. "This isn't about recognition. It's about giving her what she needs." The sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as Tom and Eddie loaded the wheelchair into Eddie's van. They'd chosen Sunday morning deliberately. The quiet streets would ensure they could make their delivery undisturbed. Tom had memorized Emily's address from the forms Jake had helped fill out when they'd driven her home that first day. The Bennett townhouse stood quiet in the early morning light, its manicured front garden speaking of wealth that Tom hadn't expected. He hesitated for a moment, suddenly aware of the gulf between his world of grease and metal and this place of obvious privilege. "Having second thoughts?" Eddie asked quietly. Tom squared his shoulders. "No, Emily needs this chair. Doesn't matter where she lives." They worked efficiently, carefully placing the wheelchair on the covered front porch. Tom made one final adjustment to the brake mechanism, then stepped back. Attached to the armrest was a simple envelope containing care instructions and a single line, "For Emily," from a friend. As they drove away, Tom caught a glimpse of light appearing in an upstairs window. Soon, Emily would discover her new chair. He imagined her hands exploring its surfaces, finding all the small details he'd incorporated just for her. The thought brought a smile to his face that hadn't been there in years. "You know," Eddie said as they turned onto the main road, "Marie would say you're being stubborn, not letting them thank you properly." Tom watched the townhouse disappear in the side mirror. "Marie would understand. Some things you do because they need doing, not because you need thanks." Back at the garage, Tom began his regular Sunday routine. Coffee, paperwork, preparation for the week ahead. But his thoughts kept drifting to the Bennett house, wondering if Emily had found the chair yet, if she could feel the care that had gone into every detail. He picked up Sarah Beth's photo from his desk, studying his daughter's smile. "What do you think, sweetheart? Did we get it right this time?" The morning sun streamed through the garage windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Tom could hear the town beginning to wake up, church bells in the distance, the occasional car passing by. Soon Monday would come, bringing its parade of oil changes and brake jobs. But something had shifted in the familiar rhythms of his life. As if by healing one small part of the world, he'd began to heal something in himself as well. The phone on his desk rang, probably Mrs. Henderson calling about her Buick again. Tom let it go to voicemail, his mind still with the wheelchair and the young girl who would be discovering it. Some moments deserved to be savored in silence. Sarah's Sunday morning routine usually involved reviewing reports in her home office while Emily slept late. But today, something was different. The security system had chimed at dawn, logging movement on the front porch. She'd checked the cameras. On her phone, watching 2 men carefully place something large and covered by her front door. Her first instinct was caution. In her position, unexpected deliveries could mean trouble. But there was something about the careful, almost reverent way the older man had made a final adjustment before leaving that gave her pause. She was about to call security when Emily's voice drifted down from upstairs. "Mom, is someone here? I heard the chime." "Stay there, sweetheart. I'll check." Sarah opened the front door, and her breath caught. Even beneath the protective covers, she could tell this was no ordinary wheelchair. Her years in medical device manufacturing had trained her eye to recognize quality engineering. With trembling fingers, she pulled away the covers, revealing a piece of craftsmanship that belonged more in an art gallery than on her porch. The morning light played across surfaces that had been finished to perfection, highlighting innovative design elements she'd never seen before. "Mom?" Emily called again. "What is it?" Sarah found her voice. I think you should come down and feel this for yourself." She heard Emily's old wheelchair creaking its way down the hall, accompanied by her daughter's careful movements. When Emily reached the door, Sarah guided her hand to the new chair's frame. Emily's fingers moved slowly at first, then with increasing wonder. "Oh," she breathed, tracing a pattern on the armrest. "Oh, Mom, it's singing to me." Sarah watched as her daughter explored the chair with growing excitement, her sensitive fingers finding feature after feature that even Sarah's trained eye hadn't noticed. The subtle texture changes that marked different controls, the perfectly balanced wheels, the way each component provided tactile feedback. "There's a note," Sarah said, finding the envelope. She opened it, reading the simple message aloud. "For Emily, from a friend." Emily's hands hadn't stopped moving over the chair. "It's from Mr. Mitchell," she said with absolute certainty. "From the auto repair shop. Remember when I told you about the nice man who looked at my old chair?" Sarah's mind raced. She vaguely remembered Emily mentioning a mechanic who'd been kind to her, but she'd been distracted with merger negotiations that day. Now, looking at this masterpiece of engineering and compassion, she felt shame wash over her. "Let's get you settled in it," she suggested, helping Emily make the transfer. The moment Emily sat down, Sarah could see the difference. The chair seemed to embrace her daughter, supporting her perfectly. Emily's entire posture changed, tension melting away from her shoulders. "Listen," Emily said excitedly, moving the wheels. There was almost no sound, just a whisper of precision engineering. "And feel this." She guided her mother's hand to a small area on the frame. "When I move, it makes tiny vibrations that tell me if everything's working properly. It's like it's talking to me." Sarah blinked back unexpected tears. In all her years running a medical device company, she'd never seen anything that so perfectly merged function with understanding of the user's needs. This wasn't just adaptive equipment. It was a testament to what could be achieved when someone truly cared. Emily wheeled herself to the end of the porch and back, her movement suddenly fluid and graceful. "Mum, can we go to the park? Please. I want to feel how it moves on different surfaces." Sarah checked her phone automatically. There were already dozens of emails demanding attention, but looking at her daughter's radiant face, she made a decision. "Yes," she said, putting the phone away. "Yes, we can go to the park. We can go anywhere you want." As they headed down the street, Sarah watched Emily moving with newfound confidence and independence. Each feature of the chair seemed designed not just to help Emily move, but to give her information about her environment, to make her more connected to the world around her. "Mom," Emily said as they neared the park, "we need to thank him. Not just for the chair, but for understanding, for knowing what I needed without me having to explain it." Sarah nodded, her mind already working on a new problem. How do you properly thank someone who had given your child not just mobility, but dignity? Someone who had seen what you, with all your resources and expertise, had somehow missed. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, we definitely need to thank him." Monday morning found Tom beneath a Ford pickup, his mind still dwelling on yesterday's delivery. The familiar sounds of the garage, tools clattering, Jake humming along to the radio, Mrs. Henderson chatting about her grandchildren, were interrupted by the distinct click of high heels on concrete. "Mr. Mitchell!" Tom rolled out from under the truck, wiping his hands on his shop rag, and found himself looking up at a woman who seemed distinctly out of place in his garage. Her tailored business suit and pearl necklace spoke of boardrooms, not repair shops, but it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were exactly like Emily's. "Sarah Bennett," she said, extending her hand after a moment's hesitation. "Emily's mother." Tom accepted the handshake, conscious of the grease under his fingernails. "Just, Tom is fine. How's Emily doing with the chair?" Sarah's carefully composed expression softened. "That's why I'm here. What you created, it's extraordinary. Emily spent all of yesterday exploring every feature. She said it feels like it was made just for her." "It was," Tom said simply, getting to his feet. "Would you like some coffee?" "It's not fancy, but it's hot." In his small office, Sarah looked at the decades of history on the walls, certification papers, old photographs, thank you notes from customers. Her eyes lingered on the picture of Sarah Beth, though she didn't ask about it. "I run Bennett Medical Technologies," she said, accepting the chipped coffee mug. "We manufacture medical devices, including mobility aids. What you've done with Emily's wheelchair, I've never seen anything like it. The intuitive design, the sensory feedback systems, the growth accommodation, it's revolutionary." Tom shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just listened to what she needed. Emily's smart. She knows her own body, her own requirements. Most folks just don't take the time to hear what she's saying." "No," Sarah said quietly, "we don't." She set down her coffee. "I've spent years focused on market research and profit margins, trying to help people in the aggregate. Meanwhile, my own daughter—" She paused, composing herself. "How much do I owe you for the chair?" "Nothing," Tom said firmly. "It wasn't a business transaction." "Everything's a business transaction, Mr. Mitchell. I learned that lesson early, in my career." But her tone suggested she was no longer sure of that assertion. "Some things are just about being human," Tom countered, thinking of Sarah Beth, of Marie, of all the moments that had led him to this one, about doing what's right. "Because you can." Sarah studied him, her professional mask slipping to reveal something more vulnerable. "Emily wants to thank you in person. Would you consider coming to dinner this Friday? Nothing formal, just a chance for her to show you how well she's mastering all the features you built in." Tom hesitated. He'd wanted to remain anonymous, to simply know he'd helped without complications, but he remembered Emily's enthusiasm for engineering, her quick understanding of mechanical principles. "Would it be all right if I brought some design sketches? Emily mentioned her interest in how things work." Sarah's smile transformed her face, erasing the corporate executive and revealing simply a mother. "She'd love that. She spent an hour this morning explaining to me how you engineered the brake system to provide tactile feedback." As Sarah stood to leave, she paused by the door. "You know, we have an entire research and development department working on next-generation mobility devices, but none of them thought to create something that could sing to its user, as Emily puts it. Sometimes the best innovations come from just caring enough to solve one person's problem," Tom said. Sarah nodded, then reached into her briefcase and placed a business card on his desk. 7 o'clock Friday. I'll text you the address again, though I suppose you already know it." After she left, Tom picked up the business card, running his thumb over the embossed lettering. Sarah Bennett, CEO. Two worlds that couldn't be more different, connected by a wheelchair and a 12-year-old girl who saw with her heart. Jake poked his head in. "Was that who I think it was? Emily's mom?" "Yeah," Tom said, still looking at the card. "Seems I'm having dinner with the Bennetts on Friday." "Good," Jake grinned. "Maybe you can finally use that sport coat that's been gathering dust in your office closet since Marie's last birthday." Tom smiled despite himself, tucking the card into his pocket. The morning sun streamed through the garage windows, catching the dust motes in its beam, and for the first time in years, he felt the stirring of something he'd thought long buried. Possibility. Friday evening found Tom standing at the Bennett's door, wearing the rarely used sport coat Jake had mentioned. In one hand, he carried a folder of technical drawings. In the other, a small toolbox containing specialized adjustments for Emily's chair, just in case they were needed. The door opened to Emily's beaming face. "Mr. Mitchell, I knew it was you. I could hear your truck from down the street." She sat proudly in the wheelchair, which hummed almost imperceptibly as she moved. "Mom's in the kitchen actually cooking, which never happens." "Emily!" Sarah's voice carried from inside, tinged with amusement. "I do cook, occasionally." The house's interior matched its elegant exterior, but Tom noticed touches of Emily everywhere. Braille labels on light switches, tactile markers at corners, carefully arranged furniture creating clear pathways. The kitchen smelled of garlic and herbs, and Sarah stood at the counter, looking surprisingly at ease in casual clothes and an apron. "I hope you like lasagna," she said, sliding a bubbling dish from the oven. "It's my mother's recipe. One of the few things I can make without setting off the smoke alarm." During dinner, Emily dominated the conversation, eagerly describing how the wheelchair had changed her daily life. "I can feel exactly where I am now," she explained, "and the chair tells me things. Like this morning, it made a different tone on one wheel, and I knew the bearing needed adjustment before it became a problem. Just like diagnosing engine problems by ear," Tom said, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Exactly," Emily beamed. "Mum, can I show Mr. Mitchell my science project? The one about mechanical resonance?" After Emily wheeled away to get her project, Sarah turned to Tom. "I've been thinking about what you've created here. Not just the chair, but the whole approach. Designing for the individual, incorporating feedback systems that work with the user's abilities, rather than trying to compensate for their disabilities." Tom recognized the shift in her tone. This was the CEO speaking now, albeit softly. It's just about paying attention to what people actually need, instead of what we think they need. "That's exactly it," Sarah said, leaning forward. "Our company spends millions on focus groups and market research, but we've never achieved what you did in 3 weeks in your garage. I have a proposal for you." She outlined her vision. A new division within Bennett Medical Technologies, focused on custom mobility solutions. Not mass production, she emphasized, but individual design for specific needs. Your approach, your philosophy, but with our resources and reach. Tom's initial instinct was to refuse. He had his garage, his routine, his independence. But then Emily returned, proudly showing him her project, a study of how different materials transmit vibrations, inspired by the feedback systems in her new chair. "See?" she demonstrated, running her fingers along various surfaces. "Each material has its own signature, just like the chair. I'm going to explore how this could help other blind people understand their environment better." Tom watched her confident movements, saw how the wheelchair had become an extension of herself, enhancing rather than just enabling. How many other children could benefit from this approach? "I'm not a businessman," he said finally, turning back to Sarah. "I don't know anything about corporate structures or profit margins." "Good," Sarah replied. "We have plenty of people who know about those things. What we need is someone who knows about people, someone who sees possibilities where others see problems." She paused, then added more softly, "Someone who takes the time to listen." Emily reached across the table, finding Tom's hand with surprising accuracy. "Please say yes. Think of all the other kids who need chairs that understand them, like mine does." Tom looked at his weathered hands, hands that had fixed countless engines, crafted intricate solutions, carried the memory of a daughter he couldn't save. Then he looked at Emily, so alive with possibility, and Sarah, whose corporate armor had softened to reveal something more genuine. "I'd need to keep the garage," he said slowly, "not just for the regular work, but as a development space. Some ideas only come when you're elbow deep in an actual problem." Sarah's face lit up. "Of course, we could set up a proper workshop there, bring in any equipment you need." "No," Tom interrupted gently. "The garage stays exactly as it is. That's where the real work happens, among the oil changes and tire rotations. That's where you hear the stories that tell you what people really need." Sarah nodded, understanding. Partners, then? You keep your garage, but help us learn to see. What you see? Partners, Tom agreed, surprising himself with how right it felt. The transition from solo mechanic to medical device innovator wasn't without its challenges. Tom's garage now hosted an unusual mix of visitors, corporate engineers in pressed shirts sharing space with regular customers, luxury cars parked beside weathered pickup trucks. But somehow, it worked. The key is in the initial assessment, Tom explained one morning to a group of Bennett Medical's development team. He was working with a young boy who had cerebral palsy, carefully observing how the child moved. Watch how Jason naturally shifts his weight. We don't want to force him to adapt to our design. We need to design around his natural movements. Sarah sat quietly in the corner, taking notes. She'd been spending more time at the garage lately, ostensibly to oversee the collaboration, but Tom suspected she found the honest simplicity of the space refreshing after corporate boardrooms. See here, Tom guided the engineer's attention to Jason's current wheelchair. The standard support structure assumes a symmetrical sitting position, but Jason's body tells a different story. We need to work with his asymmetry, not against it. The engineers nodded, their initial skepticism about learning from a mechanic long since replaced by genuine respect. Tom's intuitive understanding of how things worked, both mechanical systems and human bodies, had revolutionized their approach to design. Later, after the engineers had left and Jason's mother had tearfully thanked them for taking the time to truly understand her son's needs, Sarah helped Tom clean up the workshop. You know, she said, carefully organizing the design sketches they'd created, I used to think innovation was about breakthrough technologies and patentable features. But watching you work, it's really about seeing what's already there and building around it, isn't it? Tom smiled, wiping grease from a specialized measuring tool he'd created. People are the technology in a way. We just have to learn to read them right. The afternoon sun slanted through the garage windows, catching the dust motes in its beam. Sarah had long since stopped wearing her corporate suits to the garage, opting instead for casual clothes that could handle the occasional smudge of oil. The change in her attire matched the gradual softening of her corporate persona. Emily's teacher called yesterday, she said, perching on the workbench. Apparently, she started a lunchtime club for students interested in adaptive technology. They're designing improvements for everything from pencil grips to music stands. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Tom observed. She's got her mother's drive and determination, Sarah laughed. Actually, I think she's got your way of seeing possibilities in everyday things. Last night, she was explaining how the vibration patterns in her chair could be adapted to help deaf students feel music in band class. The mention of music triggered a memory. Marie used to play piano, Tom said quietly, surprising himself by sharing this. She always said music was just patterns of movement and emotion combined. Not so different from working on engines, really. Sarah's expression softened. She'd noticed Marie's photo months ago but had never pressed for details. You miss her very much, don't you? Every day, Tom admitted. But lately it feels more like gratitude for what we had than sadness for what we lost. He paused, then added, She would have liked you, you know. She always said I needed someone to challenge my stubborn ways. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the familiar sounds of the garage, the distant hum of tools, the occasional ding of the service bell, the steady tick of the old wall clock Marie had hung. Dad! Mom! Emily's voice carried from the front of the garage. She'd taken to calling Tom Dad recently, and neither adult had found reason to correct her. Jake says the new suspension system is ready for testing. They shared a smile, both recognizing the moment for what it was, another step in their gradually intertwining lives. The prototype they'd been developing, a revolutionary suspension system for rough terrain mobility, represented more than just technical innovation. It was a bridge between their worlds, between past and future. Shall we? Sarah asked, extending her hand. Tom took it. noting how natural it felt now, this connection between them. "Can't keep the testing committee waiting," he agreed, referring to Emily's self-appointed role as chief product evaluator. Together they walked toward the front of the garage, where Emily waited with Jake, her wheelchair humming its quiet song of perfect engineering and careful love. The article in the Business Journal should have been a triumph. Bennett Medical revolutionizes adaptive technology through unlikely partnership. Instead, it became the catalyst for their first real crisis. Tom found Sarah in his office early. One morning, her face drawn with worry, holding the newspaper. "The board is concerned," she said without preamble. "They're saying we're spending too much on individual cases, that the custom approach isn't scalable. They want to standardize the process, create templates." She almost whispered the last word, knowing how Tom would react. "Templates?" Tom set down the carburetor he'd been rebuilding. "These are people we're talking about, Sarah, not engine parts. You can't template human needs." "I know that," she said, running a hand through her hair, a gesture he'd come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. "But they're looking at the numbers. Our development costs are triple the industry standard. They're talking about quarterly. In profits, market share. And what about Jason?" Tom's voice was quiet but intense. "The boy with cerebral palsy. Should we tell him sorry? Your particular way of moving doesn't fit our template?" Sarah moved to the window, looking out at the garage where Jake was helping Emily demonstrate her wheelchair's features to a young girl with spina bifida. The girl's face shone with hope as Emily explained how her chair understood her needs. "The board's called an emergency meeting for tomorrow," Sarah continued. "They're sending in efficiency experts to evaluate our processes. They want to streamline everything." Tom picked up a custom fitting he'd machined the day before, a small piece designed to accommodate the unique way a client's hand had healed after an accident. "Streamline, that's a fancy way of saying cut corners." "It's not that simple," Sarah argued, though her heart wasn't in it. "We have shareholders to answer to, market expectations to meet. The corporate world has certain realities." "Reality?" Tom gestured toward the garage. "That's reality out there. People with real needs, real challenges, real hopes. Everything else is just numbers on paper." Their discussion was interrupted by Emily wheeling into the office, her face alight with excitement. "Dad, you should see how Amanda's eyes lit up when we showed her the adaptive controls. She said it's the first time anyone's asked her how she wants her chair to work, instead of telling her how to adapt to it." Tom and Sarah exchanged glances, the weight of their discussion hanging between them. Emily, sensitive to the tension, stopped. "What's wrong?" Sarah moved to her daughter, smoothing her hair. "Nothing, sweetheart, just some business discussions." "About making our designs more efficient?" Emily asked, surprising them both. "I heard some of the suits talking last week. They said custom designs aren't cost-effective." She turned toward Tom. "But that's not true, is it? Every person is different. That's what you always say." Tom watched Sarah's face as their daughter spoke, saw the conflict there between the corporate executive and the mother who'd witnessed firsthand the difference their approach had made. "The board wants me to present a new business model tomorrow," Sarah said finally. "Something more conventional. And if you don't?" Tom asked, though he already knew the answer. "They'll probably remove me as CEO." She straightened, her corporate armor sliding back into place. "I built this company from the ground up. It's my life's work." "No, Mom," Emily said softly. "We're your life's work. Me and all the other people you and Dad are helping." The office fell silent, except for the distant sounds of the garage. Tools clinking, voices murmuring, the gentle whir of wheelchair motors. Each sound represented a life they'd touched, a problem they'd solved not with templates, but with understanding. Sarah picked up the newspaper, staring at the photo of their garage-turned-workshop. "They're right about one thing," she said finally. "This isn't scalable, but maybe," she paused, an idea forming, "maybe it's not supposed to be. Maybe what we've built here isn't meant to be scaled up, but rather replicated, Tom raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Instead of one big facility trying to serve everyone, what if we created a network of smaller workshops, each one maintaining the personal touch, the custom approach, but sharing knowledge and resources? She was warming to the concept, her business mind merging with her newfound appreciation for Tom's methods. Like franchising compassion. Tom's tone was skeptical, but there was a glimmer of interest in his eyes. Like spreading hope, Emily corrected, her fingers trailing over the custom controls of her chair. One person at a time. Sarah looked between them, the man who'd taught her to see beyond spreadsheets and the daughter who'd brought them together. Tomorrow's board meeting loomed, but for the first time since reading the article, she felt something close to optimism. The efficiency experts arrived wearing crisp suits and carrying tablets loaded with spreadsheets. They moved through Tom's garage like archaeologists in a cave, documenting everything with barely concealed disdain. Their presence cast a shadow over the usually warm atmosphere, making even Jake's cheerful whistling fall silent. "Mr. Mitchell," the lead consultant said, reviewing his notes, "your current production time for a single custom wheelchair averages 3 weeks. Industry standard is 3 days. Tom continued working on a specialized joint mechanism, his weathered hands steady. "That's right, because we take the time to get it right. And your material costs are approximately 320% above standard, because we use what works, not what's cheapest," Tom interrupted, his patience wearing thin. He could see Sarah through his office window, pacing as she participated in yet another video call with the board. The consultant's lips thinned. "Mr. Mitchell, in the current market—" "Jason," Tom said quietly, setting down his tools. "The boy with cerebral palsy who was here last week. Did your spreadsheets tell you how many chairs he'd been through before we built him one that actually worked? Did they calculate the cost of his mother's back problems from struggling with equipment that fought against her son's natural movements instead of working with them?" The garage fell uncomfortably silent. Even the consultants seemed to sense. They'd hit against something their efficiency metrics couldn't measure. Sarah emerged from the office, her face tight with tension. "They've made their decision," she announced. "The board wants to implement immediate changes, standardized designs, reduced customization, shorter development cycles." She swallowed hard. "They're prepared to buy out the garage and convert it into a proper production facility." Tom stood slowly, wiping his hands on his shop rag. "And if I refuse? Then they'll terminate our partnership and move production to their main facility." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "They're calling it consolidation for optimal resource allocation." "They're calling it wrong," Emily's voice rang out. She wheeled into the garage, returning from her school's science fair, where she'd won first prize for her presentation on adaptive technology. Her wheelchair hummed its familiar song, a testament to everything they'd been fighting for. "Look at me," she continued, moving to face the consultants. "According to your standards, this chair took too long to make and cost too much. But can your spreadsheets measure independence? Can they calculate dignity? Can they quantify the difference between existing and living?" The lead consultant shifted uncomfortably. "Young lady, business decisions can't be based on emotional—" "Why not?" Emily challenged. "When did we decide that efficiency matters more than humanity? Mom always taught me that good business serves people first. Isn't that right, Mom?" Sarah stood frozen between worlds, the corporate empire she'd built, and the deeper truth she'd discovered in a humble garage. Tom watched her, his heart aching for her impossible position. "I can't do it," he said finally, his voice soft but firm. "I won't turn this place into an assembly line. Every person who comes through that door has a story, has needs that can't be standardized. If that means ending the partnership—" He trailed off, looking at Sarah with eyes that held both apology and conviction. The consultants huddled together, updating their reports. Sarah moved to Tom's side, close enough that he could smell her familiar perfume, a scent that had become as much a part of his garage as oil and metal. "They'll remove me as CEO," she whispered. Everything I've built. Sometimes, Tom replied, equally quiet, you have to tear something down to build it better. He thought of all the engines he'd had to completely disassemble before he could fix them properly. Emily wheeled between them, taking each of their hands. Then we'll build something new together. The lead consultant cleared his throat. Mrs. Bennett, the board is waiting for your decision. Will you implement the recommended changes? Sarah looked around the garage, at Jake pretending not to listen while he worked on a brake line, at the wall of thank you cards from families whose lives they'd changed, at Emily sitting proud and straight in her perfectly crafted chair. Finally, she looked at Tom, seeing in his eyes the same certainty she felt growing in her heart. No, she said, squeezing Emily's hand. I won't. She turned to face the consultants, her voice gaining strength. Please inform the board that they'll have my resignation within the hour, and let them know that they're about to have some serious competition. The silence that followed felt like the pause between lightning and thunder, a moment of suspended potential before everything changes. The day after Sarah's resignation, the garage felt different, quieter, yet somehow more alive with possibility. Tom found her there early in the morning, sitting at his workbench, running her fingers over the worn edges, just as Emily did when reading the world through touch. Couldn't sleep? He asked, setting down 2 cups of coffee from Eddie's shop next door. 23 years, she said, accepting the coffee. I founded that company right out of business school. Back then, I thought I was going to change the world. She smiled ruefully. Funny how you can spend decades building something and still somehow miss the point entirely. Tom pulled up his familiar shop stool, its wooden seat worn smooth by years of use. You didn't miss the point, Sarah. You just found a better one. Through the window, they could see Jake opening up for the day, greeting their regular customers. Mrs. Henderson's Buick needed an oil change. Bill Thompson was dropping off his truck for new brake pads. The ordinary rhythm of the garage continued, unchanged by corporate earthquakes. Emily was up late working on designs, Sarah said, pulling out her daughter's sketch pad. She says if we're starting fresh, we should think bigger than just wheelchairs. She's drawn up concepts for adaptive sports equipment, musical instruments, art tools. Tom studied the drawings, noting how Emily had incorporated their feedback principles into each design. She's got your business sense and my mechanical intuition. Heaven help the world when she gets old enough to run her own company. About that, Sarah set down her coffee, turning to face him fully. I've been thinking all night about what we built here, about why it works. It's not just the technical innovation or the custom approach. It's the environment itself. She gestured around the garage, at the organized chaos of tools and parts, the wall of photographs showing smiling clients with their custom equipment, the comfortable waiting area where people shared stories and support. This place, it's not just a workshop, it's a community. Every person who comes through that door becomes part of something larger than their individual needs. Tom nodded, understanding dawning. That's what you meant about replication rather than scaling up. Exactly. What if, instead of one big corporate entity, we created a network of places like this? Small, independent workshops where craftsmanship and caring go hand in hand. We provide the training, the technical knowledge, the connection to resources. But each shop maintains its own identity, Tom finished, warming to the idea, its own relationship with its community. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in its beam. Tom thought about all the lives they'd touched, all the problems they'd solved not with corporate efficiency, but with time and attention and care. Marie used to say that healing happens in layers, he said softly, surprising himself by sharing the memory, that you can't rush it or standardize it. You just have to create the right conditions and let it unfold in its own time. Sarah reached over and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his, naturally, as if they'd been doing this for years, instead of sharing their first real moment of intimate connection. I've been so focused on building something big, she admitted, that I almost missed something huge. She squeezed his hand. This, us, the family we're becoming. The word family hung in the air between them, full of meaning and possibility. Through the window, they could see Emily arriving with her caregiver, her wheelchair moving with the precise grace that had started their whole journey. "Dad!" she called out as she entered, her face bright with excitement. "I had an idea about adapting the sensory feedback system for prosthetic limbs. And Mom, I think I figured out how to make the production costs work." Tom and Sarah shared a look, years of professional respect and growing personal affection crystallizing into something deeper. They had lost things. Sarah's company, Tom's solitude, their carefully constructed separate lives. But what they had found was worth so much more. "Well," Tom said, standing and pulling Sarah up with him, their hands still joined, "let's hear this idea of yours. Sounds like we've got a new company to build." "A new family to build too," Emily added with a knowing smile, reminding them that sometimes the youngest eyes see the clearest. The garage filled with morning light, tools gleamed with promise, and three people who had started as strangers stood together, ready to build something that spreadsheets could never measure, and efficiency experts could never understand. A future shaped by love, understanding, and the simple power of taking the time to care. The news of Sarah Bennett's resignation sent shockwaves through the medical device industry. Speculation ran wild about what could have prompted such a successful CEO to walk away from the company she'd built. But in a small garage on the outskirts of town, a different story was unfolding. "Mitchell Family Innovations," Sarah read from the newly drawn logo Emily had designed. "Are you sure about the family part?" Tom looked up from where he was installing a specialized lift system for their next client. "Seems right to me, unless you have objections." Their relationship had evolved naturally over the past few weeks, neither of them feeling the need to label or rush what was growing between them. They worked in comfortable synchronization, Sarah's business acumen complementing Tom's technical expertise in ways that made their new venture feel less like a startup and more like a homecoming. "No objections," Sarah smiled, watching Emily demonstrate her wheelchair's features to a potential investor, a former board member who'd followed her from Bennett Medical. "It's just nice," hearing it said out loud. The investor, Richard Chen, sat fascinated as Emily explained the philosophy behind their designs. "So each piece of equipment actually learns from its user." "Not exactly learns," Emily corrected, her hands moving expressively. "It's more like it's designed to have a conversation with you, like how my chair tells me through vibrations when I'm approaching different surfaces, or how it adjusts its response based on whether I'm tired or energetic." "She sounds more professional than half my former marketing team," Sarah whispered to Tom, pride evident in her voice. "Gets that from her mother," Tom replied, then added softly, "though she's got her father's way of seeing the heart of things. Now, too." Sarah's breath caught at his words. It was the first time he'd referred to himself as Emily's father out loud. Before she could respond, the front door chimed. A woman entered, pushing a teenager in a standard wheelchair. The boy's body was tense with discomfort, his movements restricted by equipment that fought against his natural patterns rather than supporting them. "Welcome to Mitchell Family Innovations," Emily said, wheeling forward. "I'm Emily. Would you like to tell us your story?" Tom and Sarah watched as their daughter guided the family through their initial consultation, asking the kinds of questions that spreadsheets never thought to ask. Not just about physical needs, but about dreams, daily challenges, moments of joy that could be expanded with the right support. "She's remarkable," Richard said, moving to stand beside them. "And this approach, it's completely different from anything I saw in 20 years on the board." He paused, then added, "I'm not the only one who thinks so. Half your former department heads have been calling me, asking about joining the new venture." Sarah felt. Tom tensed slightly beside her. "We're not looking to rebuild Bennett Medical," she said firmly. "What we have here is special precisely because it's different." "I understand that now," Richard nodded. which is why I'm not proposing we scale up. I'm proposing we scale out. He gestured to Emily, still deep in conversation with the new family. What if we could create places like this in every major city? Not factories, workshops, not employees, partners. Each location maintaining this level of personal attention while sharing resources and expertise. Tom's hand found Sarah's, their fingers intertwining naturally. Like a family, he said thoughtfully, connected but independent, each with its own character, but sharing the same core values. Exactly, Richard agreed. And with your reputation in the industry, Sarah, combined with Tom's innovative approach and Emily's ability to communicate the vision, he spread his hands. The funding is there. A lot of people want to be part of something meaningful. Before either could respond, Emily called out, "Mom, Dad, you need to hear Marcus's ideas about adaptive gaming controllers. He's got incredible insights about haptic feedback." They moved together toward their daughter and their new clients, the future unfolding before them like a blueprint drawn in hope and possibility. The afternoon sun slanted through the garage windows, casting long shadows that seemed to connect everyone in the room, family and strangers, past and future, dreams and reality. "You know," Sarah said quietly to Tom as they walked, "when I resigned, I thought I was giving up everything I'd built. I never imagined I was actually making room for something better." Tom squeezed her hand, understanding as always. Sometimes the best innovations come from letting go of what we think we need to build and paying attention to what's trying to build itself. Around them the garage hummed with purpose, not the sterile efficiency of a corporate facility, but the warm productivity of a place where lives were changed, one careful adjustment at a time. 6 months after Sarah's resignation, Mitchell Family Innovations had evolved in ways none of them could have predicted. The garage remained their heart of operations, but it had gained a new rhythm, a perfect blend of old and new. Tom still did oil changes and brake jobs in the morning, keeping his connection to the community that had supported him for so long. But afternoons transformed the space into a development workshop where engineers collaborated with clients and innovative solutions were born from real conversations about real needs. "It's like a teaching hospital," Sarah explained to a reporter from Adaptive Technology Monthly, who had come to write about their unconventional approach. "Every standard repair is an opportunity to train our engineers in practical problem solving. Every client interaction is a chance to understand the human side of what we do." The reporter watched as Tom worked with a young engineer from their newly opened Seattle workshop. They were adapting Emily's sensory feedback system for a violin bow, allowing a young musician with partial paralysis to feel the subtle movements needed for proper technique. "See how the pressure sensors communicate with these haptic responders?" Tom demonstrated, his weathered hands gentle on the delicate equipment. The bow becomes a conversation partner, not just a tool. Emily wheeled past, leading a tour for representatives from 3 medical schools interested in their apprenticeship program. Her wheelchair had become a mobile demonstration of their philosophy, and she took pride in showing how each feature represented a deeper understanding of user needs. "The key isn't adapting people to technology," she was saying, "but adapting technology to people. Every person who comes through our door teaches us something new about what's possible." Sarah, watching from her modest office, formerly Tom's, storage room, felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Her corporate life seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by something far more satisfying. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Tom appeared in her doorway, wiping his hands on his ever-present shop rag. "Just thinking about numbers." She smiled. "Not profit margins or market share, but real numbers. 23 adaptive workshops opening across the country by next year. Over 100 families served right here in this garage. 12 graduate students enrolled in our first engineering apprenticeship class. Don't forget the most important number," Tom said. moving behind her chair and resting his hands on her shoulders. 3 people who became a family when they weren't even looking for one. The gentle whir of wheelchairs and quiet conversations filled the air, punctuated by the familiar sounds of garage work. Through the window, they could see Jake teaching a client's brother basic maintenance routines, ensuring the whole family understood how to care for their new equipment. "Did you see Emily's latest design?" Sarah asked, pulling out a sketchpad. "She's thinking about college now, talking about biomedical engineering programs, but she wants to keep the garage internship program as part of her studies." "Smart girl," Tom nodded. "Knows you can't learn everything from books. Some lessons only come from getting your hands dirty and your heart involved." A commotion from the workshop drew their attention. Marcus, the teenage gamer they'd met months ago, was demonstrating his new adaptive controller system to a group of excited kids from the Children's Hospital Rehabilitation Unit. His parents stood nearby, tears in their eyes as they watched their son, once isolated by his physical limitations, now confidently teaching others. "You know what this reminds me of?" Sarah said softly. "That first day, watching Emily explore her new chair. That moment when I realized we'd been thinking about everything wrong at Bennett Medical." "Funny how life works," Tom mused. "Sometimes you have to lose your way to find your calling." The afternoon light painted the garage in warm hues, highlighting the Mitchell Family Innovations sign Emily had designed. It wasn't just a company name anymore. It was a promise, a philosophy, a legacy, building itself, one careful innovation at a time. "Dad!" Emily called from the workshop. "Can you help us explain the proprioceptive feedback system to Dr. Chen? He thinks it might have applications for surgical training." "Coming, sweetheart," Tom replied, then paused to drop a kiss on Sarah's head. "Dinner at home tonight? I thought I might try Marie's old lasagna recipe again." "Home," Sarah repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, though maybe we order backup takeout just in case." Their laughter mingled with the sounds of the garage, tools clinking, wheels turning, lives changing. Outside, more families arrived, each carrying hopes that would soon be transformed into possibilities. Inside, 3 people who had once been strangers continued building something extraordinary, a business founded on understanding, a family forged by compassion, and a future limited only by their ability to imagine better ways of caring for each other. 1 year to the day after Sarah's resignation, Mitchell Family Innovations celebrated the opening of its 25th workshop. The garage was filled with faces both familiar and new, families whose lives they'd touched, engineers they'd trained, medical professionals who'd embraced their philosophy. But Tom's attention was fixed on something else entirely: the small velvet box in his pocket, and the question he'd been waiting for the right moment to ask. The celebration had been Emily's idea, though she'd insisted on handling most of the arrangements herself. Now Tom understood why. Watching her masterfully orchestrate what she'd later reveal was more than just a company milestone. "Everyone!" Emily called out, her wheelchair humming softly as she moved to the center of the garage. "Before we continue the celebrations, I'd like to share something." She pulled out a worn notebook, Marie's old recipe book, Tom realized with a start. "I found this while helping Dad clean out some boxes last week, and inside I found something interesting." Sarah, standing beside Tom, squeezed his hand as Emily began to read. "Dear Tom," Emily's voice carried clearly through the hushed garage. "If you're reading this, it means you've finally cleaned out that messy drawer I've been nagging you about. It also means I'm not there to nag you anymore. But that's okay, because I know something you don't. Someone else will come along who sees your heart the way I did." Tom felt Sarah's hand tighten in his as Emily continued. "You have so much love to give, Thomas Mitchell. Not just to one person, but to everyone whose life you touch. I've watched you fix more than just engines. You fix hope, you repair faith, you restore possibility. Someone else needs to see that. In you, the way I always have." Emily looked up, her eyes shining. "There's more. When you find her, and you will find her, don't waste time doubting. You'll know it's right, because she'll understand that the grease under your fingernails is really just evidence of how much you care. She'll see that your garage isn't just a workshop, it's a place where miracles happen every day. The garage had fallen completely silent. Even Jake, who usually couldn't stay quiet for more than a minute, stood perfectly still, grinning. "Mom." Emily turned toward Sarah. "Dad's been holding something in his pocket all day, and if he doesn't ask you soon, I think he might burst." A ripple of gentle laughter broke the tension. Tom shot his daughter a look that was equal parts exasperation and gratitude. Trust Emily to orchestrate the perfect moment while making it seem like spontaneity. "Well," Sarah turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Is our daughter right?" Tom pulled out the small box, suddenly aware that his hands were trembling. Slightly. He'd planned a dozen different speeches, but looking at Sarah now, he knew Marie had been right. When it's right, you just know. "You walked into my garage and saw possibility where others saw problems," he said softly. "You gave up an empire to build something real. You and Emily, you made my life whole again." He opened the box, revealing a ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. "Sarah Bennett, would you help me keep building miracles?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." The garage erupted in cheers. Emily wheeled forward to hug them both as Tom slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger. Through his tears, he noticed something engraved inside the band. "Where miracles happen daily," Sarah read, recognizing the words from the sign that had hung in his garage for decades. "Speaking of miracles," Emily said, her voice carrying that tone that always meant she was up to something, "I have one more surprise." She wheeled to the garage door and pressed the button to open it. Outside, lined up perfectly, were dozens of wheelchairs, adaptive devices, and mobility aids, one from each of their workshops across the country. But these weren't just any pieces of equipment. Each one had been crafted for someone who couldn't afford it, paid for by a foundation Emily had secretly established in Marie's name. "The Marie Mitchell Foundation for Adaptive Innovation," Emily announced proudly, "because everyone deserves a miracle, not just those who can afford one." Tom looked at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who had brought them all together. Then at Sarah, whose eyes shone with the same mix of pride and love he felt. "Marie was right," he said quietly, holding them both close. "The drawer needed cleaning out, because sometimes you have to make room for new miracles." Around them, the garage hummed with joy and possibility. The afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold, catching the tears on Sarah's cheeks, the proud smile on Emily's face, and the simple truth that had brought them all together. Sometimes the greatest innovations aren't the things we build, but the lives we touch and the love we share along the way. 2 years later, the garage looked much the same, yet somehow different. The old sign reading Mitchell's Auto Repair still hung above the door, but beneath it gleamed a newer one. Mitchell Family Innovations, where miracles happen daily. Both were true, both were needed, both told the story of a family that had found its purpose. Tom still started his days early, the smell of coffee mixing with oil and metal as the sun rose. But now he had company, Sarah in her own coveralls, a wedding gift from Jake, reading the morning papers while sharing breakfast at his workbench. They'd kept her townhouse, but spent most nights in the small apartment above the garage, where the sounds of hope and possibility had become their lullaby. Emily was home from her first year at MIT, where she'd created a stir by establishing a program combining engineering with practical experience in adaptive technology. Her wheelchair had evolved too, incorporating new innovations she'd developed with her university team, but it still sang the same quiet song of perfect engineering and careful love. "Dad," she called from the workshop area, "can you help me with this new sensory feedback system? I think it might be the breakthrough we've been looking for with pediatric prosthetics." Tom smiled at Sarah. Some things hadn't changed. Emily still saw possibilities where others saw problems, just like her mother, just like Marie had predicted. The Marie Mitchell Foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams, now supporting 50 workshops across the country. Each location maintained their core philosophy: take time, listen carefully, build hope. The corporate world had finally caught up to their vision, with major manufacturers now following their lead in personalized adaptive technology. But here in the garage, where it all began, the real magic still happened daily. Oil changes and tire rotations shared space with innovative designs. Local customers chatted with visiting engineers, sharing stories and insights that would shape the next generation of improvements. Sarah walked up behind Tom as he examined Emily's latest design, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thinking deep thoughts?" "Just grateful thoughts," he replied, covering her hands with his. Their matching wedding rings caught the morning light, simple bands engraved with the words that had brought them together: where miracles happen daily. Through the open garage door, they could see the future arriving in all its forms: families seeking hope, engineers learning to listen, lives waiting to be transformed. But more importantly, they could see their own future in Emily's determined spirit, in their shared passion for helping others, in the love that had built something greater than any of them had imagined. "You know what Marie would say about all." "And this?" Sarah asked softly. Tom nodded, his heart full. "She'd say some machines aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be transformed, just like some people aren't meant to be alone. They're meant to be family." The morning sun streamed through the garage windows, catching the dust motes in its beam, turning ordinary air into dancing light. In that golden glow, 3 people who had once been strangers stood together, surrounded by the tools of their trade, wrenches and wheelchairs, business plans and dreams, and most importantly, the simple, powerful ability to care enough to make a difference. The garage hummed with possibility, ready for another day of everyday miracles.